Welcome everyone to the Skin Consult series where we talk about evidence-based skincare. Today, I am extremely honored to have our next guest, Dr. Mara Huber, and she's a board-certified dermatologist. And I would love to share her, tidbits about her. So, Dr. Huber graduated from University of Santo Thomas Faculty of Medicine and Surgery. She has completed her dermatology residency from Jose Rice Medical Center, and she ranked first in her Philippine Dermatology Society board examination. So she's a trooper. She's also an internationally certified dermapathologist. So for those of you that don't know what that is, it's a dermatologist who specializes in diagnosing diseases of skin, but also hair and nails under a microscope. So she is a pro in the lab as well. And Dr. Huber is multi-awarded both internationally and locally for her research work in dermatology. And she has also obtained her master's in clinical trials from the University of London, where she graduated with honors. So there's no one better that I can think about to have here on our chat today to talk about evidence-based skincare. She is popularly known on social media and on Instagram as Dermomtology. So go give her a follow, and she shares a lot about evidence-based skincare on her social channel, where she likes to debunk skincare myths, and share about what evidence-based skincare is. So I really am so glad to have you today, Dr. Huber. Thanks for joining, and let's dive right into really talking about skincare, evidence-based, and what does it all mean?
When we say evidence-based, the word evidence refers to, scientific or medical research. Something that people don't instinctively understand is that when you hear the word research, it doesn't really refer to the same thing. And they're also not the same quality. So maybe you'll hear about a research that's done on rats or on mice or rabbits, right? And then you're also going to hear about research done in humans. So the important thing to remember with evidence-based medicine in general, not even, skincare specific, is that research is not created alike. So there are two main types of research that I already mentioned. One is laboratory research, which is usually done on like animal cells, human cells, which you call in vitro. Or you can do it in animal models, like the ones I mentioned, like rats, mice, rabbits, actual live beings that aren't humans, and you call those in vivo studies. And then you also have the human studies. But human studies also aren't created alike. You have some studies just done on one or a few individuals, and then you have clinical trials, which have more subjects. And then you also have something called observational studies, where they're not really trials in the sense that you're not giving people something, then you sort of compare the results to see if one group fared better than another. You just observe them. So even within the realm of human studies, they're not also created alike in terms of the quality of evidence. But basically, of course, animal studies are not as strong in terms of evidence as human studies. And in terms of human studies, those that are actual clinical trials have better evidence than observational studies. And the larger the sample size, or the more people you study, then of course the evidence is also better. So that's like the first tenet that I think people should understand when we say evidence-based medicine. Now, going into evidence-based skincare, because the stuff that we put in our skin could either be, as you know, a drug or a cosmetic. And these two are regulated worlds apart. So a drug, which is really meant to cure, mitigate, treat, or prevent a disease or affect the function or structure of something in the body, that has to be FDA approved. And what that means is that the FDA has to really look at human clinical trials and see that there's strong evidence in those trials before they even market a drug. So that's basically a big requirement of drugs. Cosmetics, on the other hand, they're not really FDA approved. You may read it, something a company would say their cosmetic is FDA approved. It's really not. It's not. Because only drugs and certain devices that you put inside your body and biologics are given FDA approval. So that's the concern here, is that cosmetics aren't really required to provide the same scientific rigor as a drug. And because by and large, the skincare world is basically a lot of cosmetics and a few drugs, you don't really have a strong of a scientific consensus for these cosmetics. But that being said, and I'd love to talk about this later, there are cosmetic ingredients that have more evidence than others. So we want to focus on those. We like those cosmetics. We like those tried and tested cosmetics.
That is so well said, because, evidence can be different strengths, like level of evidence is strong versus weak, like you explained how, animal studies versus more human trials. And that's really something that I know the Skin Consult is helping consumers understand, really see what are the key ingredients, like you said, that we'll talk about, that have the right efficacy, at least in smaller trials that have been done, if not large, big randomized trials, right? Okay, so that leads me into asking you to understand, how do we know if these products are safe? I mean, the regulation is not very strong for, cosmetics. So as a dermatologist, as a healthcare professional, skincare professional, how do you figure out what's safe, what's not, and how do we help consumers, understand?
Right. Well, I remember there was this huge debate going on in social media if cosmetics are even regulated, right? Because suddenly people are clamoring for evidence-based medicine, and then of course everyone's saying there's not enough evidence for cosmetics to work. So does that mean that they're unsafe? And it gets confusing. That's why it's good that your company, your platform, educates people, because understanding the nuances of these things, you really need a group who understands all of this information, and you don't nitpick stuff and just say, yeah, all cosmetics are not regulated, which means they're unsafe. Really, really appreciate experts like you and platforms that educate people that your cosmetics are regulated. It doesn't mean that if it's not FDA approved, then it's not regulated. So basically, of course, this is under the expectation that the company is reputable, right? Because we know in many countries, companies who don't follow the rules do exist. So this is why it's important to have brands that you trust, reputable companies that you trust, who will actually follow the FDA regulation. So basically, the FDA regulates cosmetics in the sense that they require the company to make sure that the products that they release are safe. So it is on the company, or sort of, they're a watchdog. They're gonna look at the cosmetics in the market and then see if they're unsafe. They're gonna find the company. They are gonna act against the company if their products are found to be unsafe. Therefore, it's they're sort of innocent until proven guilty.
Yes.
That's how That's how cosmetics are, which is why I think it's very important for dermatologists and your company to vet and really go for brands who are known to be safe. I think that's really the best way that you can assure yourself that your product is safe. Basically, too, there's this entire thing about clean beauty, right? Where they're sort of saying, go for clean beauty because everything else is going to be toxic. Well, the reality is, you can't release a product if there's a toxic product in it or toxic ingredient in it. That's just not possible. The FDA will not allow that. So if you say this is clean beauty, does that mean that products that don't market themselves as clean beauty then have harmful ingredients? But the thing is, the minimum for any company is for the product to be safe. So even if there's no clean beauty, non-toxic thing slathered all over the labels of that product, it means it's still safe because it can't get through. It would not be, within FDA regulations to release a product that is unsafe. So basically, you want to make sure that you're going with a company you trust. And secondly, there are ways you can reach out to the company if you're not sure. Basically, there are 3 usual ways a company sort of tests their product. So first, they have internal testing. So they do the results, they keep the results in their own, in their own library, but it's not really published in medical journals. So that's the second way, is to actually publish the safety results in journals, so you can access it. And the third one is they do testing apart from their internal testing. So you might have heard of the patch testing or the human repeat insult patch testing, and like testing if there are microbes, like microbial testing in the product. So there are other ways to see if the products are safe other than just within the company. And you can ask the company, if they're transparent enough, they would share that with you. So these are the ways that you are assured that your products are safe. And please just don't go with products that are from companies who are not legitimate, or you haven't really heard of, or that's the problem, because there are a lot of small companies that are starting. How about where you're based? Is it something that you could actually look online in, or I'm not familiar with your regulations?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked, because, of course, the Skin Consult serves customers from across the world. It's not just the US. The majority of our, customers are US based. And in the US, actually, it's a volunteer registration. So with the fact that if you're a cosmetic company, your brand may choose to register with the FDA. And so in terms of mandating any sort of regulations is a little bit hard to enforce when companies are not registered, and not all of them do get registered. So I would say the latest statistic I saw in 2017 data shows that, which I know is like 5 years ago, so a lot has probably changed, but only about 1,000 skincare brands were registered, and know that there's a lot more brands on the market now. Skincare is a big industry. It's growing quickly, and there's new brands that come out every single day. So to your point about really vetting and understanding the brand's, research practices or development practices is really important, that the average consumer doesn't quite know or really even cares to research that much into it. And that's why the Skin Consult, through our TSC verified process, which has 5 specific steps, we really do curate and vet each product, not even a brand, but product within a brand, to make sure that they have gone through the right formulation, but also have the right ingredients. Like you said, the FDA has, said like, okay, these ingredients are safe to use. We're not taking them off the market. We're not banning them because we don't think there's enough toxicity data on it. So the companies are still able to use those ingredients until proven otherwise, right?
Right.
So, safety is something that we obviously are very concerned with, and with safety comes efficacy. And one of the things that leads me to my next question for you is speaking about efficacy, because typically when we do clinical trials with say pharmaceutical agents, we do clinical efficacy and safety trials. First step is always the safety, and then we look at efficacy. So in the cosmetic world or in the skincare world, unfortunately, very few brands go and do those efficacy trials, even if they're like small trials of 100 patients. There's very few brands that do that because of you don't have to do it. It's not a requirement, right, to come to the market. And we know that with your background in clinical trials, and with mine as well, clinical trials are not cheap. They're expensive. And we can, there's a reason why not all brands are able to do trials. It's a lot more complicated. So how do we as consumers and healthcare professionals determine how these skincare products that don't always have the efficacy data, how do we know that these products actually meet certain efficacy criteria for acne, anti-aging, and specifically hyperpigmentation? I know these are the 3 things that mostly our customers on the TSC platform are looking for.
Right. Well, luckily for us, for those 3 things particularly, so you've mentioned acne, hyperpigmentation, and the promotion of collagen, or at least exfoliation, which would both benefit the slow down aging process. So all of these things are actually pretty good. There are really drugs that exist, skin drugs that exist to address these things. So what I usually do for my patients is, if they are a good fit, my tendency is to always give a prescription drug if the need for it arises. Because the reality is, a few dark spots, a few acne, skincare would likely just be fine. But there is a line that a doctor you just know that at this point you probably have to go with a drug. And the reason we do that is that the efficacy for these drugs, the way they're tested, and you have a background, as you know, it's very rigorous. So when I look at a product or an ingredient, of course, my first step is to look in the literature. And what the literature would usually show me would be, as I've mentioned, animal studies or laboratory studies. Essentially, these studies would tell us, number one, how is it potentially going to work? And two, is it going to penetrate through the skin? So penetration studies, that's usually done in the lab. And also the idea of like proof of concept, like, how is it really going to act on skin? The problem is that doesn't really translate into an effect in humans. So you want to do the clinical trials to see, okay, so it's been shown in laboratory studies to have some potential effect. There's this mechanism, a logical mechanism. It also goes through the skin according to the lab. But the problem is it really gonna, have effects? And there are ways to measure improvements for acne, for collagen production, or anti-aging, or for dark spots. Then we do certain, and you know that, right? You do the test machines are even involved just to see if there is truly improvement. So the problem with some cosmetics is that they sort of focus on, does it penetrate the skin? Does it have a potential mechanism of action? But they don't really proceed to the part where, will it work on humans? Like an actual living human and not just a human cell. And like you've mentioned, because there is no incentive to do it. It's expensive, and then it's not even required. So at the very least, if I do not see clinical trials, and even within clinical trials, I'm very specific at what kind of clinical trial.
The trials that we want to look for, unfortunately, don't exist for skincare brands. And I don't think they'll come around to doing those, at least for some time, until there's a requirement, because of the added expense that is gone, part of it. And one of the things that the Skin Consult we do is, obviously, we look at active ingredients in terms of, okay, well, there's a list of about 30 active ingredients in published literature that have proven that they're going to work for acne, or they're going to work for this type of acne, like specifically cystic acne. They're going to work to boost collagen, right? Like, for example, so those type of things, consumers and professionals like you are able to really get to the customer and teach them that, well, just because a product says salicylic acid on it doesn't quite mean it's going to work the way we think another salicylic acid product will work. And actually, that's one of the things that I'm really truly passionate about, is because I know that with any product or any medication, any chemical rather, there is a thing about, absorption, how things get absorbed, how things actually get metabolized, how things work. And technology, or how that product is formulated, is very important. So when I look at a product with salicylic acid in product A, salicylic acid in product B, they're not going to work the same. Dupes are not always going to be the same efficacy, unfortunately, because there's, technology that's built into a better formulated product. And so this kind of goes into my next question as well, is, just ingredients. And in one of your social media posts that I enjoyed reading about, it said that cosmetics and drugs and skincare, and you labeled it as like 50 Shades of Gray, which was really cute. Okay, so what is this gray area that you refer to in this cosmetic versus skincare world?
Right. Well, first, even though cosmetics are not regulated like drugs, there are some ingredients that have more evidence than others, like I've mentioned. I mean, for example, you have cosmetic ingredients that are related to drugs. So if you think about it, just because they're related to drugs, for example, your retinol is related to tretinoin. Arbutin is related to hydroquinone, which is a bleaching agent. So if you think about it, because they're related to drugs, they're likely going to have better efficacy than other cosmetic ingredients. And yes, they do. And yes, they do. So it's like, it makes sense. And yes, they do. They do have studies supporting that. And then another thing too is, apart from that, there are a lot of cosmetic ingredients that get interest in clinical trials too. For example, you have the very good example here is L-ascorbic acid, or your topical vitamin C. They have a lot of supportive evidence, and yet they're not really regulated as drugs. Or retinol. Retinol is probably the most studied cosmetic ingredient. It has there's a lot of evidence behind it. Of course, tretinoin has more, but it really is the granddaddy of cosmetic ingredients when it comes to clinical trials. And yet it's still considered a cosmetic, and it's not regulated as a drug. So it doesn't really mean that if a cosmetic or if an ingredient is not a drug, then it's not effective. Just because it's not FDA approved,
right?
There is really there's really a delineation between cosmetics with more and cosmetics with less evidence. That's why the hype on bakuchiol or succinic acid, I mean, they have potential, but they're being compared to retinol and salicylic acid. And they've been here for years, tried and tested. That's another thing that I look at when I assess an ingredient, is that have they tested? Have they been able to withstand the test of time? Where multiple studies from different people, different companies have said the same thing. And with some ingredients, you just have like one study, two studies, sometimes even from the same people. So that, for me, is not as strong as evidence.
Yeah, I mean, we have, we want to look at data from like class effect rather, right? Like, okay, salicylic acid in general is a great option for your, acne, to remove blackheads and clogged pores and, help decrease the sebum production. But then the second layer of that is understanding different types of salicylic acid formulations, like different products, because how a product is formulated. So like to your point about retinols, for example, and this is something that we have seen a lot on our platform, and I see this on social media, is really just because a product says a retinol on the front of it, the marketing claim is retinol, retinoid or whatever, it does not quite mean it has the right retinol in it. Might have retinol palmitate. It might just have a retinol ester blend. It's not a true retinol molecule, like that is going to give you the right type of efficacy that you would expect. And so marketing claims, of course, when we look at pharmaceutical agents, they're highly regulated, and being in the side of industry where I have spent a lot of time on marketing of pharmaceutical agents, that was one of the things I see a stark difference between pharmaceuticals and cosmetics, is that the marketing claims that companies make are not necessarily regulated to the extent that they should be. So when you say is a retinol on there, is it really truly a retinol? And is this going to do anything to your skin to improve the wrinkles, boost collagen, have those effects? And so I'm sorry, I went on, are these substantiated? How do you kind of weed through these, things out there that may or may not be accurate necessarily?
Yeah, well, for example, when a drug makes a claim, the thing is, it was actually that exact product that was tested, and then the claim refers to the product itself. So many cases I've seen that a cosmetic company, would actually use some other cosmetic company's data on their own product, right? So for example, you have a company with a salicylic acid product. They tested it, good results. Another company with a salicylic acid concentration of X, similar to this other company, would say studies have shown that salicylic acid is blah. And then, of course, remember you mentioned this a while ago, you look at the product, not just the ingredient, because sometimes the studies quoted by cosmetic companies refer to different products, not their own. And formulation is king. Like you've mentioned, there are ways that the formulation tweaks, that the ingredient performs better. So that's the difference between a claim in drugs and cosmetics, is that claims in drugs are regulated and has to refer to the actual product itself, because the FDA really regulates claims in that respect for drugs. But for cosmetics, there really isn't, there's no FDA approval for claims. There isn't even a list of claims that the FDA says, okay, you can use this, you can use this. There's no specifics in terms of this. But the FDA does require that claims are true, that they are, they're not just pulling it from the air, they're not misleading. But again, it's not really, when you don't undergo a pre-market approval process where like before you release the product and then the claims are examined, then basically you're just, again, solving a problem when it's already out. That's just the problem with cosmetic claims. So I would take claims just the grain of salt. Yeah. But there are, for example, hypoallergenic claims. Honestly, even I thought that hypoallergenic meant that there was rigorous clinical trials testing like hundreds of people for them to say that the product was hypoallergenic.
Yes.
Right? And then I realized that no, there isn't even like a specific list of things you need to exclude for a product to be hypoallergenic. I think especially in the US. In Europe, they're starting to define it better. But even then, it's just really a guidance, and it's not, it's not a hard rule that everyone has to follow. So like, and clean beauty is defined by the company that claims it's clean. Yes. So a lot of claims are really dependent on what the company says, which is a little sad, because even the term clinically proven or dermatologically tested, it could mean one dermatologist tested it on herself, or the company actually did their best effort and tested on 100 or more people. So that's just the sad part about the claim, is anyone can literally claim it without really, and that's why you guys exist. That's why experts exist, experts like us exist, to look at the evidence and actually say, is there any evidence backing up their claim? Because the claim itself is not evidence. That's just it.
Yes. It's so black. It's not as black and white as we would like it to be. Like you're saying, and I mean, there's some great tidbits that you shared in there that I think consumers, that our viewers would probably really appreciate, is knowing that, when a claim is made, it's not necessarily from that particular product. It could be from another brand. And that's really good for us.
Well, as a dermatologist, I realized that truly skincare is so individualized. Like, for example, I just cannot tolerate tretinoin. I can't.
Yes, me neither.
I've done everything. I just can't. I've tried vitamin C. I can't tolerate it. So alpha hydroxy acids, I can't tolerate it. So now I have the things that I know work in clinical trials, but they're not working on me. They're not working on me at all. So I think the way to approach it is, of course, we always want to go with what suits you best. And usually, if you go to an expert, the expert will also direct you to what the evidence says. And the evidence would be, it would first we will look at the journals, we look at the studies, and then we look at the products. If it's from a reputable brand that likely does testing, we would like to go with that. But the reality is, even if you have the magic ingredients, sometimes they just don't work for you, for specific patients, right? So that's why I feel that skincare, even though we have really good drugs and also really good cosmetic ingredients, there is room for others that are, not really on top of the hierarchy of evidence-based skincare. And I feel that ladder, I feel like with skincare, it's actually going a step down for me. I like going down. I try to start with the one with the highest evidence. If my patient can't tolerate it, let's go down, let's go down, let's go down. But of course, still going through the levels of evidence that I have mentioned. That's usually my thing. Like for acne, of course, my number one would be tretinoin, and then benzoyl peroxide, topical antibiotics, salicylic acid, alpha hydroxy acids. But even then, I have patients who can't tolerate any of those at all. And that's where your smaller studies come in, like you said, maybe for a few patients, or studies done on the just cells, studies that are maybe even just anecdotal evidence from experts who have seen hundreds of patients, and this worked for them. And this is the problem. As consumers, you don't usually know. That ladder we're talking about, you don't usually know. And that's why
sometimes.
Yeah. And that's why you really need to talk to experts, because that's why we are here. We're figuring out all of that for you. Of course, it's fun to do your own research.
Yes.
But experience really comes in the picture. And when we say experience, it's not experience with your skin. It's experience with a lot of people's skin.
Others, yes.
Not just yours, because we will not minimize that. You are the expert of your skin in terms of you live in that skin. But we have seen a lot of other skins that are similar to yours, a little different to yours, and we sort of know how to tweak it based on the medical evidence that we have to see what's best for you. So that's really what I think that really has to be said. So there are really ingredients that have super good evidence. So let's go to the hyperpigmentation. Like you mentioned, you have a lot of clients who look at that. So short of hydroquinone, which a lot of people are afraid of, arbutin is a really good option.
I love arbutin.
Right? Because it's related to hydroquinone. I mean, that's perfect, right? They're related. And then you also have your licorice. I love licorice. I love kojic acid. Niacinamide is a nice helper that goes along with a lot of them.
Maybe down the line, but as a booster.
Yes, exactly. Just like a nice friend who hangs out with you, your wingman, but not really like the main person. Azelaic acid is also really nice because it targets a lot of stuff. Acne, dark spots, good for pregnant, breastfeeding women.
Exfoliating a little bit. Yes.
Exactly. So I really like multitaskers. And I'm sure that you love those two, like ingredients that do a lot of stuff rather than just like this one thing. And you like products that also have these ingredients mixed together rather than although of course there are single ingredient products can fit some people's needs, but I do like more bang for the buck, and they're all together just doing the same thing for you, right?
Makes it more complicated.
And your platform will really help people figure out which products are really worth their money, because these products they cost money. Right?
Yes. I mean, why waste time and effort and trial and error? I really like what you said before about, not everything's going to work for you the first time. Even if you were seeing the best dermatologist, the best skincare expert, as my master esthetician, what they recommend to you might not be it may or may not work for you right away. But because you're under the care of an expert, you are getting that coaching and guidance to really refine and optimize. And then once you are at a place where your routine is now stable, now you know exactly what's working, what's not working, then you can continue on. It took me almost, 5-6 months to really get down on my routine, because there's certain things that don't work for me, like tretinoin just was making things worse for me. And unfortunately, many people sometimes think, tretinoin's the best, I'm just going to use it. But sometimes, you do need something like a retinol is probably more appropriate for you, and maybe not even 1%, 0.5%. And so that's, skincare is a journey, and we really want people to understand that one time getting your skincare recommended by a friend or an influencer or even a professional is not going to solve get you on the right track. We really are here to coach you, educate you, and make sure that we find the right solution. And I like what you said about building the evidence-based regimen of different ingredients that work in complement with each other, because and that's how our algorithm works, is that we build the regimen with evidence that supports using multiple active ingredients as appropriate for your skin type and skin goals. So maybe for someone that cannot tolerate glycolic acid because it's too much, we're going to start you with mandelic or lactic. Maybe if you're acne prone, then maybe mandelic is better. So it's an art, and it's
yes.
We don't
exactly.
we cannot people do a lot of trial and error. I personally spent lots of money on just buying so many products. We have Sephora, and my VIB status was like the max, because I just had so many skincare products, because I would try something and it just would make it worse or not do anything for me. And so that goes into the last question that I wanted to, and we kind of talked about it a little bit, is just about this, there's always new products coming to the market. I mean, people love to try new things, including myself. And there's always also this hot new ingredient. A brand might come out that is now really focused on, we have this proprietary ingredient and we're going to, have a whole brand focused on that, which is great. I think new options is always great for our world. So, how is there a way to kind of help navigate through all of those, products that are coming out every single day, besides, the skin consult helping you, or a dermatologist?
Well, I think what's really important is tried and tested. This is like my motto. It's like tried and tested is always better than shiny and new when it comes to really anything in life, honestly, because there's this FOMO. Everyone has FOMO. You're always, I should try something new. But first off, the skin needs time before it responds to a product A. So that's A. You need patience for any results to happen. And B, the results that back an ingredient for years is there for a reason. That's why I mentioned a while ago, I really look for ingredients or products that for decades of research, different people have studied them on different people. Because it's different if, for example, I'm Asian, and then you're using a product that works perfectly for you. But what if some nuance in my skin, because I'm from a different race, would make me, for some reason, just not tolerate the product? That's why decades of experience, that product, that ingredient has worked and has been shown to be effective in different types of people, in different ages or different locations. And that's really what we call generalizability, is when the results of a certain study applies to the world at large. And that takes time. That takes time to show that something works. That's why the vaccines, remember, they really go through research on different people, different countries before they're rolled out. And when it comes to your skin, it's sort of the same thing. You want to go with something that has been shown to work with different skin types, different races, or different skin concerns. And then you feel more confident. So if you have a new ingredient, especially, and they're not even required to have clinical studies, right? So when an ingredient comes out, first you ask yourself, is there really even clinical trials backing this up? For example, azelaic acid is fairly new compared to tretinoin. So you could argue, but azelaic acid is new. But then it really has a lot of good evidence backing it. So even if it's newer, not really newer, it has evidence. And then you have bakuchiol, which has like one clinical study, or succinic acid, which I'm not familiar. I hadn't really looked through the literature yet, but I'm sure that it's nowhere near salicylic acid's powerhouse of evidence.
Popping up, yes.
Yeah. So again, that goes back to my evidence-based ladder. Always start with the ones with the highest evidence. And then if it doesn't work for you, that's when you go down the ladder of evidence, because at least you're guided and you don't just let go of something.
That's very true. Yes. You know, gold standard is always gold standard. And that's why it's called gold standard. Absolutely. I think, you know, we're all about supporting new brands and new products, but it has to be backed by science and really the right way of doing things, which, you know, I think some brands are starting to embrace that. And, you know, I think they're going to win in terms of showing better data and efficacy when more and more people use their products. And it's really great to have, you know, healthcare professionals like that are in the skincare industry, especially dermatologists, and through social media in the last, I guess, a year and a half, have really stepped up on social media, you know, debunking these myths, such as yourself. And so, you know, along with that, with other, you know, efforts that a lot of us are taking, you know, we are trying to raise the bar in the industry and raise the transparency, you know, getting people to understand what is evidence-based, what are these ingredients, and, you know, it's hard, it's not as easy to solve, and, you know, we have to start somewhere. And so really connecting to experts is something that can really help you just cut down on the time and frustration and cost that goes into figuring out.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And I think honestly, when I started my dermatology page, my goal was to teach. Then I realized I just learned so many things as well. So even like you already have such a great background, and I would say I have a good background too, but the things we learn from other experts, because no one knows everything in skincare. And it takes humility to be like, oh, I didn't know that. I mean, honestly, if you have an ingredient or a product that isn't really on top of the food chain, so to speak, but you're happy with it, and you know, it's not causing you harm, it's sparking joy. Sometimes skincare is really not just the efficacy, effectiveness. For me, the minimum is safety. But sometimes you use it because it makes you happy. It gives you self-care. It sparks joy, like I said. And don't make us take that away from you, please.
Yes.
And, you know, science is ever evolving. I may say things about bakuchiol now, but we don't know. 10 years down the line, it might just be that, you know, we don't know. Science evolves.
It's progressing all the time, and we hope that it continues to progress in the industry, because we want to come out with better and better agents and ingredients for people of different skin types and personalized to that, you know. And we really appreciate you coming by, and thank you so much. Look forward to having more of these conversations with Dr. Huber and other skincare experts such as her, and continuing the conversation around evidence-based skincare. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks for having me. Bye.